There is a strange kind of loneliness, the kind that doesn't happen when you're alone. It happens when you're surrounded by people, and somehow you still feel like nobody really sees you. You laugh when everyone else laughs. You answer the messages. You go to work. You sit with your friends. You talk about ordinary things. What you ate. What happened today. What you're going to do tomorrow. And from the outside, everything looks completely normal. But somewhere inside, there is a quiet feeling you can't explain. Something is missing. And the hardest part? You don't even know how to ask for it. Because how do you tell someone you're lonely when you're never actually alone? Sometimes loneliness doesn't begin with people leaving. Sometimes it begins when you stop feeling understood. You can have hundreds of people around you and still feel like you're speaking a language nobody understands. So you start keeping certain things to yourself. The thought you don't want anyone to know. The fear that sounds ridiculous when you say it out loud. The disappointment you pretend didn't hurt. The thing you've been thinking about for weeks, but keep telling yourself, it's not a big deal. So you don't say it. And then you don't say the next thing either. And eventually, people know what you do, but they don't know what you're carrying. They know your jokes. They know your personality. They know the version of you that you show them. But they don't know the version of you that exists when the room becomes quiet. And this is where something interesting happens. The longer you hide parts of yourself, the harder it becomes to show them. Not because you're incapable of being honest, but because you've practiced hiding for so long that hiding starts to feel safer than being seen. You begin thinking, maybe they wouldn't understand. Maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe they'll think I'm weak. Maybe I'll make things uncomfortable. So you smile. You change the subject. You say, I'm fine. And sometimes you become very good at saying it. So good that eventually other people believe you. And that's when loneliness becomes dangerous. Because now the people around you aren't necessarily ignoring you. They simply don't know that you're asking to be noticed. Imagine someone standing in a crowded room, holding a small box. Nobody knows what's inside. Maybe it's fear. Maybe it's regret. Maybe it's the memory of something that happened years ago. Maybe it's a dream they gave up on. Maybe it's simply the exhaustion of pretending everything is okay. They keep holding the box. Someone walks past and asks, "How are you?" They smile. "Good." And the person walks away. Not because they don't care, but because they believed the answer. The box stays in their hands, day after day, until carrying it becomes so normal that they forget what it feels like to put it down. But here's something we often misunderstand about loneliness. We think the solution is always finding more people, more friends, more conversations, more messages, more social activities. But sometimes what we actually need isn't more people. It's more honesty. One real conversation can sometimes feel more comforting than 100 empty ones. Because connection isn't created simply by being around someone. Connection happens when you feel safe enough to let someone see what's underneath. And that can be terrifying. Because being seen means risking rejection. It means someone might misunderstand you. They might not have the perfect answer. They might not know what to say. But sometimes you don't need someone to fix what's happening inside you. You just need someone to know that it's happening. Maybe that's why some people sit in silence together and somehow feel closer than they do after hours of conversation. Because there is no performance, no pretending, no carefully chosen version of yourself. Just two people being human at the same time. And perhaps that's what we've forgotten. We spend so much time trying to appear okay that we forget how powerful it can be to simply say, I'm not. Not dramatically, not for attention, just honestly. I'm having a difficult day. I don't know what's wrong. I've been feeling alone lately. I don't really know how to explain it. Those sentences may seem small, but sometimes they are the first crack in a wall you've been building for years. And if you've been feeling lonely lately, there's something I want you to remember. Your loneliness doesn't necessarily mean that nobody cares about you. Sometimes it means you haven't felt safe enough to be fully known. Those are not the same thing. You don't have to tell everyone everything. You don't need to suddenly become completely vulnerable. You don't have to explain your entire life. Maybe you start with one person, one honest sentence, one small piece of the box, and you let someone hold it with you. Because people aren't always looking for someone who has all the answers. Sometimes they're looking for someone who stays, someone who listens, someone who doesn't make them feel strange for feeling what they feel. And sometimes you can be that person for someone else too. There are people around you right now who may be carrying things you know nothing about. The person who always makes everyone laugh. The friend who never asks for help. The coworker who always says they're fine. The person who seems confident. The person who seems happy. The person who always has something to say. You may never see their box, just like they may never see yours. And maybe that's why we should be a little gentler with each other, because everyone is fighting battles that don't always make noise. So if you've been feeling alone, don't mistake silence for proof that nobody cares, and don't assume that being understood requires someone to completely understand your life. Sometimes connection begins much smaller than that. It begins with a message, a conversation, a walk, a cup of coffee, a quiet room, or simply saying, "Can I tell you something?" And maybe, for the first time in a while, you don't have to carry everything by yourself. Because being surrounded by people isn't the same as being connected. And being alone isn't always the same as being lonely. Sometimes the distance between two people is only one honest sentence. So, if you've been carrying something quietly, maybe you don't have to put the whole box down today. Maybe just open it, just a little, and let someone see what's inside. Because sometimes the first step out of loneliness isn't finding more people. It's finally allowing yourself to be known. What is something you wish people understood about you without you having to explain it? Share it in the comments. Someone reading your words might realize they're not the only one carrying that box.